Even though the past 12 months have been really difficult and challenging, there are still a lot of good things that's come from everything that's happened and some big lessons that I think that we can take away in terms of what's been going on and what's still going on in the world. And we can choose to apply what we've learned to help improve our mental health and well-being in the long term. Find out how in this episode of Let's Talk About Mental Health. Here comes the intro and then let's talk. Hello and welcome to another episode. I'm Jeremy Godwin. Thank you for joining me. This week marks the 1-year anniversary since the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 global pandemic. And hopefully I'm not going to be triggering anyone's PTSD here by reminding you of that time when the world went nuts and toilet paper became the most precious commodity on the planet. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat the truth here. The past 12 months have been rough. We've had to find a way to get through each day, even though we're constantly on edge and worried about what's next. And all this while still trying to balance all of our responsibilities and, worrying about our family and our loved ones and friends, and also having to put up with all of the nonsense shit on social media and in the news where people keep on using this pandemic for political purposes or as a means of spreading crackpot conspiracy theories. And I don't know about you, but I have good days, average days, and terrible days. Because quite frankly, the human body was not designed to operate at this high level of stress for a long period of time. And that's something I talked about in episode 18 of the podcast, Let's Talk About Burnout, as well as episode 8, Let's Talk About Stress. And those episodes are worth checking out if you're struggling with burnout or stress. But the point of this week's episode is to focus our perspective on the positives. Let's not dwell on the negative things that have happened because I guarantee you there's going to be plenty of coverage over the course of this week around number of cases, the number of people that we've lost and the ongoing issues. What I want to do is say that in spite of all of the shitty things that have happened, there have definitely been some wonderful things that have happened. And so today, I want to share 5 of the biggest lessons from the past year and talk about what they mean for your mental health. So, let's talk. Number 1. The things that we thought mattered don't really matter that much, if at all. I'm probably going to be a bit controversial here, but I don't really care. Who honestly gives a crap about things like the latest phone or the latest smartwatch? I mean, I'm still wearing my first generation Apple Watch because I could care less about having to upgrade every year when a new one gets released that's got like one new feature in it. And given that the entire world changed back in March 2020, for me at least, I'd rather make sure that I have enough money put away so that I never have to find myself thinking about how the hell am I going to pay my bills, if there's any kind of like major event like this again. Really? Who gives a crap about trying to keep up with other people with new devices or the latest clothing or whatever? Who gives a crap about what other people think of you? Who cares what people think of us on social media? Who cares about all of those little inconveniences like our supermarket not having our preferred brand of toothpaste in stock? It might have taken a pandemic and a toilet paper shortage to show us how silly these things are. But now we're able to make choices that focus much less on what really is not important and instead to focus on what actually matters. Which brings me to the second big lesson. What matters most in life is the people that we care about. Let me ask you, what was the first thing that you did when the pandemic started and the whole world went crazy almost overnight? Did you stop and check to see how many likes you had on Instagram or how popular your most recent post was? Did you order a new Prada bag? Did you instead do what most of us did and immediately start to check in with your nearest and dearest? In other words, your family and closest friends. If, like me, your first thought was about the people that you care about and not things, then doesn't that tell you something about where your priorities lie? Look, I get it. Having nice stuff is nice. And I'm certainly not suggesting that you get rid of everything and just live with one fork and 2 plates and nothing else. I mean, I have stuff. But I don't think that you need to go off and live in an igloo in the middle of nowhere to really be mindful about things. I think if you just take the attitude that stuff is just stuff and remember that you can't take it with you, I think that begins to really change your perspective on things. Nobody in the history of the world ever said on their deathbed, "Oh shit, I really should have bought more Gucci belts before I died. My life is incomplete." We use stuff for two things: distraction and status. And when the Rona roller coaster started, most of us quickly realized that none of that mattered. And so, if that's the case, the lesson here is to focus on what really matters most in your life and to think about that as we continue to move forward. Instead of going back to the way that things were, create a new way of being. One that puts those who matter most to you at the absolute non-negotiable top of the priority list in your life, regardless of anything else. And so that means that if something is negatively impacting on that, like your job demanding excessive hours of you that takes you away from those people that you care about the most, then either change your situation or change your job. I know that's pretty blunt, but who can really be bothered beating around the bush? The choice is always yours, but don't waste your time on things that don't serve your true priorities. Which brings me to my third point. We really are all in this thing called life together. Young, old, black, white, rich, poor, gay, straight, fat, thin. COVID doesn't care who you are or what your deal is. The virus doesn't discriminate, so why do we? Quick question for you. What colour was this person? Who did they sleep with? What religion were they? No idea? Well, that's the point. Why is it that we all seem to instinctively understand that every single one of us on this planet is individual and unique, and that that's part of the human experience, and yet so many people then spend their whole lives arguing that their type of individual is better than another type? We're all individuals. That's the friggin' point. Stop buying into the bullshit that bigots and assholes sell to us in terms of trying to say that it's this group against that group, and instead focus on the thing that we do all share, our humanity. If each of us chose to focus less on our differences, this world would be a much, much better place, and we'd be much more connected with one another. And so the choice there is always yours. And speaking of connection, my fourth point is there are many different ways to connect with other people. Who would have thought 12 months ago that we'd be happily chatting to one another on Zoom, even if some people could still stand to work out how a mute button works? And even though we're constantly being bombarded with terrible news and hysterical opinions, there's still a strong sense of camaraderie and, I think, shared hope between many of us who aren't total assholes. And isn't that what life is about? Finding things in common with your fellow human being? You can find many different ways to connect with other people, regardless of whether or not they're a friend or a total stranger. And when you do so, you're contributing in some small way to a much kinder world. And the more you do that, the better off things will be for all of us. Which leads to point number 5. How you choose to practice self-care is totally up to you. I talk about self-care a lot because it's a massive part of looking after your mental health and well-being. But how you do that is up to you. If you want to use your downtime learning a language or baking sourdough, then good on you. But if you want to spend your time curled up on the sofa, binge watching every single episode of RuPaul's Drag Race plus All Stars plus Untucked in chronological order, like I did, then good on you. Self-care is really personal, and it's nobody's business what you do but you. You know what? I don't catch up with anyone on weekends anymore. There, I said it. Why? Because my partner works all week, and so the weekends are just for the two of us. Well, 3 of us if you count our cat Igor. That's my choice, and it's just as valid as those of you who choose to go rock climbing every weekend or go and have massive catch-ups with like 50 people when there's not restrictions on. You do you. Whatever you do, just do what feels right for you, but also be proactive around making time for self-care, because it's that stuff that's really the most important in terms of putting in that time to recharge your own batteries. And I talked about self-care back in episode 6 of the podcast, and I would encourage you to check that out. The thing with self-care is whatever feels right to you is up to you, but do it, because self-care is important and it means that you realize that you are worth it. And besides, let's be honest, nobody else is going to do it for you. So if you don't, then you're not going to replenish your own battery and you won't have energy to keep pushing yourself through and be taking those next steps that you want to take in life. I'm actually going to give you a bonus tip. Who knew that would be coming? Which is, you can and will and did survive anything. All the way back in 1859, Charles Dickens wrote the book A Tale of Two Cities, and it was set amidst the events of the French Revolution in 1789. And the opening line of this classic novel is, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." And really, don't you think Dickens could have been describing these past 12 months? In spite of all of the horrible things that have happened, all of the loss and the pain and the isolation, you have survived. And that is a wonderful reminder that in spite of the horrible experiences that we've had and feeling trapped in our homes or worrying about the people that we care about, or at worst, grieving over loved ones that we've lost, in spite of all of that, we have seen time after time that there is so much good in the world that should be celebrated. We've seen communities come together to help one another, and we've seen people treating one another like fellow human beings. And those are all things that I think we should celebrate and which we should fight tooth and nail to keep in the future, because that is what makes the world a much better place. And so what about you? What has been your biggest lesson over these past 12 months? Share with me in the comments below, or head over to Instagram and tell me there. I'd love to hear from you. So that's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you again next week. Look after yourself and make a conscious effort to share positivity and kindness out into the world, because you get back what you put out. Take care and talk to you next time.